Oopsie daisies, I may have made a clone baby here on V'ger Please. A vile visit to Bajor. My name is Joseph.
I am not going to attempt to read any more memory alphas. I'm your co-host, Peter.
Just multi-page every time for this show. It's the inverse of everything we've experienced in the past.
Across the board, too. It's not only more complicated memory alphas, but the episodes as well. And as I sat there watching today's episode and thinking back to the prep work that we did with the Next Gen episodes, peak Next Gen episodes, too, right? Like,
yeah.
Maybe not the best of the best of the best.
No, Chain of Command is usually like in that strata. So,
sure,
you know.
But I mean, there was nothing bad in there. These were great episodes, and the amount of extra complexity in the Deep Space Nine product is just staggering. And I think there's something very strong to be said for both cases. The cut and simple next gen approach, whereas DS9 has a million different threads all running in vaguely the same direction. And through Enterprise, once in a while, especially in the Xindi arcs, it just felt like they would pack so much in. And it, DS9 over and over again, I feel like I'm watching that level of complexity and just busyness in the episodes.
It was hard to look back and see, like, that was 45 minutes. I feel like I watched 2 episodes. Like,
absolutely,
there's so much going on.
So as we're watching these DS9 episodes, I want to keep thinking and keep talking and to contrast it with Next Gen, which is still on the air. What is Next Gen doing with all the extra time? Are they talking faster in the DS9? Is the pacing faster? How are they fitting this much more content in? What's Next Gen doing by comparison? And why didn't Next Gen feel boring or slow or stupid or bad?
I think it was helped by the fact that what TNG was doing was having much longer extended dialogue scenes, particularly with Patrick Stewart involved, right? Like, a lot of sit down. We're going to have a briefing. We're going to be having one-on-one in the captain's quarters or in his ready room or on the bridge. We're going to do walk and talks in the hallway. We're going to do conversations in engineering. And that, I think, is what is missing here. This is moving from scene to scene to scene. We don't have a lot of monologuing going on. We don't have a lot of extended conversations between characters. We've just, we're going from plot point to plot point to plot point to plot point, and they're all relatively brief. And that means you're ended up with a lot more content happening within the same amount of time. That's my impression anyway. But what was this episode?
I agree with you. Real quick before we move on, I also think that Next Gen had bigger bigger conflict arcs, maybe. Like every episode, Red Alert was going to happen. And there was going to be that high tension ships facing off, or the crew versus the bad guy of some sort. And like this episode, there's not a big bad, like there's a piece of shit, but there's not like, okay, here is the villain of the week facing off with us, and like the mini arc of that conflict. A lot more just drama. We made the joke earlier that this is like the Melrose Place of the Star Trek, right?
Yeah, it's just more drama.
Yeah, more
just conflict. It's like shit happening between people.
It's more life and the loss of it. Season 1, episode 4, A Man Alone. This was first aired the 17th of January, 1993, which is still very prevalent by this low-res 480i.
Yeah,
man. The fuzz, the glow. Again, very British feeling. Teleplay by Michael Piller, story by Gerald Sanford and Michael Piller, directed by Paul Lynch.
Our opener here is our B plot, I guess we'll call it. This is actually a nice return to form, right? We've got an A plot, we got a B plot, and we have a C plot in this episode. No wonder it feels like a lot happened. And we open actually on the B, which is Julian Bashir. He is hot to fuck Dax. He wants Jadzia Dax real bad. It's definitely a little much on his part. He comes in trying to get a date, really horny, while Dax is meditating on a giant glowing green thing.
Here's another big difference between Next Gen and Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine loves shitty special effects, and they are not afraid to jam them into as many scenes as possible, whether it's Odo's morphing or whatever the fuck this floating ball thing is. I don't think this stuff would have looked good back in 93, and it sure as hell does not look good in 24.
I will say that the 480i-ness of it kind of just makes it better in some ways. Like the higher resolution bad CGI that we watched because so much of Enterprise was shot in HD was more obvious. Even when we watched Voyager, because it was in progressive scan, it was more obvious. Here, it's just fading in with the rest of the cheapness that's going on around us.
It does, but there's just a willingness in Deep Space Nine that I've seen now. The Tears of the Prophet, this thing again, the Odo effects, just to have weird shit on screen that is purely CG. Whereas again, TNG, I think it was a lot more practical, grounded for the most part. Although maybe my season 6 and season 7's a little rusty. Maybe they did splash a little bit more of that stuff in. This is the first real low stakes intro I think we've had with Deep Space Nine up to this point. I hope that this puzzle thing becomes like an ongoing plot.
No, it's strange actually. This episode has a number of things that they decided to do dramatically differently later. One of which is like Jadzia's resistance to the idea of having romantic relationships. In fact, I would say Dax is the character that fucks the most in all of Star Trek ultimately, which is kind of conveyed in a way when they talk about Curzon chasing chicks with Commander Sisko back, in his prior incarnation.
Yeah.
But so the like her coldness to the idea of a relationship, they just like, now we're going to go the exact opposite direction with this. Jadzia is the one that's DTF the most.
And remember too, this isn't Roddenberry, but this is still Berman, and this is still Riker going around and fucking everything. And early TNG really set the tone that fucking is cool, and everybody does it a lot in the Federation. So kind of weird. She's got the Trill thing going, and maybe it's a cultural difference, but it's an odd change of gears. Julian's determination to bang her, I think this guy does a nice job of presenting a guy that's really into her without being a complete creep about it. There's no Reed vibes
he's young
here at
and
all.
enthusiastic. He's young,
but it's not like threatening and rapey or like skeevy.
Yeah, he's like, hey, how about now? Hey,
it's that English charm.
I got the champagne.
It's an English accent adding a little bit of extra charm to make it worth it.
I appreciate also, even in this early kind of Bashir, where before they kind of start giving him plot, that he's never bad at his job, right? Like he's got his big seal eyes as he's trying to woo Dax with his boyish charm, and then gets called into a murder scene, and he is on the spot. He's ready to figure it out, and there's no like, I'm derailing this because I'm still trying to get laid, right? Like when he's on the clock, he's professional, and it helps you not hate him. But ultimately, Dax leaves the stupid brain teaser thing after having a little touching on Julian's brain and making him even hornier, to go have dinner with Commander Sisko. And when we cut back from the intro, we actually get their conversation, as well as a really fun interaction between Odo and Quark, who are one of the many kind of odd couple character pairings that wind up doing a lot together over the course of the show. And this one's maybe the most obvious because it's the criminal and the cop.
It's fantastic. They get at least 2 good interactions. There's the one before Odo is put on paid leave, and then after. And I'm curious where they can go from here, because it feels to me in these early interactions like they've already been doing this for a couple years.
Yes.
They know what the relationship's supposed to be. You can obviously see it because it's accessible archetypes and it's a familiar story, right? So they're plugging into tropes, but they're bringing a level of familiarity that these characters have for each other, and maybe they step off it a little bit, which is certainly stuff that we've seen in Voyager, where it's like, oh, cool, hey, look, I expect us to be at this level next time, and then we come back to it, and it's something drastically different. But the friendship is already there. Quark, who should be inconvenienced by this guy, is doing an awful lot to facilitate his well-being through this thing. And I love all of it. Mm-hmm. If that was the only 2 parts of this entire episode, it still would have been 45 minutes well spent.
That scene between those two, credits to Armin Shimmer and Renee Avengeros, right? Like, they're iconic in these roles for a reason. But boy, like, they just didn't. The level of acting talent already embarrasses so much of everything else we've watched over 300 episodes of Trek reviews, Peter. It really
and these are guys acting through
tons of makeup.
4 inches of fucking rubber.
Yeah. You know exactly, like, especially with Quark, right? In the background, when he gets super horny about Dax, join the club, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, no doubt what he's thinking, what he's saying, how he says it. And you just already kind of know so much about his character in his mannerisms and how he is conveying that. And it's fantastic, right? Like, and compare this to the fucking dead fish nonsense that we've had to deal with at times, whether it's Reed or Mayweather or Ensign Kim.
Yep, there you go.
Like, or
trifecta of terror.
Chakotay, like
early Chakotay.
None of those guys ever give you that vibrant take on their character the way these dudes are in their 3rd episode in one scene.
Is that the offset for casting beautiful men?
Yeah, I guess, like, if the uglier you are, the better acting you have to be. Like, it's the way you have to get that charm somehow. But
listen, that's a 2-way street. That's a problem for men and women.
And problems for men and women are a lot in this whole first part of the episode.
Like the Odo end of that conversation, because he basically admits to Quark, like, I've never fucked, or maybe I've never even dated. And then Quark's like, well, why? And Odo's like, well, you got to compromise, and I don't like that. You want to watch TV. She wants to listen to music. So now you're listening to music, and you like jazz, but she likes Klingon opera. Now you're listening to Klingon opera. And it's like, so what? You're just a big simp, basically? Is the problem that you don't want to be in a relationship, or just you're a punk bitch that gets walked all over?
Odo is someone who just wants to be alone. He wants to be in his bucket.
Sure.
I empathize. I also empathize with Chief O'Brien, because he made a bit of a mistake in taking this job, because he brought Keiko and his daughter, and this is a garbage heap in the middle of nowhere, and it's not necessarily as inviting an environment as the flagship of the Federation, and maybe Keiko is a little mad about it.
He does not belong in this place. His character does, in terms of its history, because of Cardassia and his get shit doneness or whatever. Mm-hmm. Him as a family man, it's ridiculous. He's willing to put in for a transfer, and then Keiko's like, no, I can't do that to you. That's not fair. You'll lose your promotion. It's like, well, who fucking cares? Because money doesn't matter. And essentially, if we're to use the best explanation for Federation life, that's what we got out of the Orville. And that's, Starfleet service brings prestige and opens up nicer apartments or whatever. Who cares if you're living in junky ass Deep Space Nine? Like, I'm not saying she should have died, but maybe they got a divorce or something. Maybe they were afraid of just having him as a character there by himself without that family thing. Maybe that's the family made him attractive, because he is the only person minus Cisco who, we'll see what kind of dad and what his relationship ends up being there. But this is really, who have we had in Star Trek up to this point that actually has a wife and child and is active main cast? Not Crusher.
Up to this point, zero. So this is the only complete family unit up to this point.
So you got a guy who's a pretty good actor that the cast, that the fan base knows. He's got an interesting story of killing Cardassians, and unfortunately he's got this family thing, which also makes him unique. So you can't get rid of the family, because now you lose the only instance of that.
Yeah. Which you watched develop on screen. You saw him get married. You saw his daughter get born. Worf delivered her.
So you can't just delete the wife, right?
Right. Can't pull it. Can't pull that trick.
But this is ridiculous. And then you got Keiko, who is a Federation citizen and a scientist, but is not Starfleet, yet was serving on the Starfleet flagship, which makes sense because the Enterprise had a big civilian scientist population. Sure, and now she's stuck in, Johnstown or whatever here.
She's chapped in the ass end of nowhere next to a really cool space portal into the Gamma Quadrant that she can't really space butthole into the Gamma Quadrant that she can't go through because she's not on any of those ships. And she doesn't know what to do because there's not really a call for a botanist on Deep Space Nine. And she's having a bit of a crisis of, what's my purpose? My husband is really important here. He's got a really big job and I got nothing. And this is about Keiko essentially finding a job, which I think adds a little bit to her character and makes her more interesting, which is to say, well, I'm a scientist. Why don't I become an educator? Why don't I become the school teacher for this garbage scow? There's like a dozen kids here. They need someone to teach them.
How'd you feel about that?
I do like that Jake talks shit about doing remote learning. I guess.
Oh, Jake, if only you knew.
Jake, you're right, man. It does suck to do shit on your iPad by yourself. It's way better to be in the classroom. Well, you're very ahead of the curve on that. I mean, it makes sense for the story you're trying to tell, which is the rebuilding of a civilian life on the station, which has been missing, right? And so normalcy means commerce. It means families. It means a place that has life to it. And what better way than to also have a school where there's kids?
I think her pivot into education, being self-motivated, felt foolish. Had there been a Federation dispatched teacher who would either come in and either be overwhelmed and need help and recruit her, I think that would have been a good transition. Or the Federation teacher showed up, looked around, and said, "Abso-fucking-lutely not. I'm going to put in for a transfer and leave." And then Keiko kind of sit there and look like, I wanted my husband to leave, and I see now that there's a need for him here, and now this teacher is leaving, and I'm staying, and I'm going to assume that role. And maybe, when you're jamming this much shit in, you don't have time for D tier plot Keiko O'Brien, but her just pivoting into there. I kind of like the idea at first, Miles is well, hey, we should get some trees planted. We should Citadel this place up. Citadel had cherry blossoms in Mass Effect, which, if you're starting with us in Deep Space Nine here, we love us some Mass Effect, so get ready for that nonstop. But some sort of applied botany, arborist stuff on Deep Space Nine, because I really paid attention to the background scenes and the set pieces this episode, and I think Deep Space Nine can best be summed up by saying there are no right angles. Everything is curved, steepled, or has some goofy angle to it. The worst offender, whatever the med bay is where Julian was cooking man soup,
Yes.
there's like a closet or a room with like a smaller science area or like shelving or something. And I'm looking and it looks like this Dr. Seuss inspired architectural style where there's just like a crooked door frame for no fucking reason that blocked off a big portion of shelving.
I mean, they're trying to give you a different design language because it is supposed to
Absolutely.
be a Cardassian station. So if the Federation ships have this sort of
Swoop.
uh, a swoopy feel to it, very modern feel to it, then we want harsh, weird angles happening here, and for things to just not be laid out the way that we're used to. I
It
get that.
feels gothic.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very gothic station that has a Dracula element to it. And when you look at the revised Cardassian armor, I think that feels very Bram Stoker's. That was what, 92 that came out?
Yeah, the film version with by Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if they. I'd love to tell you. I'm sure it's in this
20
encyclopedia,
paragraphs.
but I don't have time to read all of it. So I did like the idea of like, we've got the station. It is not human. We could human it up with some plants, but instead they're going with this education angle. I get it.
It lets you do more with like Jake because he is like a character you've got to do stuff with. Nog obviously gets introduced in this episode a little bit more. They become big, they're an odd couple that becomes very important. Speaking of couples that become important, platonic ones, Sisko and Dax. So the story we get through this conversation and one that he later has with Dr. Bashir is he was boys with Curzon, and Curzon was his mentor and father figure, but like the kind of father figure that goes and fucks twins with you. So like, the bad dad.
Sure.
Dad who teaches you how to like live life on the edge. And he's passed away. And now it's Jadzia Dax. And
It's his daughter.
And now it's a little awkward, as they say. Like, you were an old man and now you're a real hot lady, but he doesn't have romantic interest in her. That is very clear and stated directly in this episode. And he is trying to rebuild his friendship with this person that has fundamentally changed, yet hasn't. She's still eating the same gross boiled vegetables to help her live a long time that Curzon did.
Jump back to the Can Beverly Crusher Become Gay episode, which was the first time that we were introduced to the Trill. Right?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And you can never use like the premiere episode as like, okay, this is the final form and this is, the best way to view these guys. But in that episode, was the Trill life cycle and habit like known, or did that all come as a surprise to Crusher? I can't remember.
I can't remember either. It's not a surprise to Sisko. I don't think it's a surprise
No, and that's
to anybody here.
an inconsistency that Sisko would know about this, but the lady who'd go on to become the head of Starfleet Medical didn't know about it. Sisko still has these very. I liked him in the last episodes. This episode, he has these unhinged moments that come off very jarring.
It almost feels like he's this weird psychopath that doesn't know how emotions work. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's very noticeable. It's like when he like fake laughs after like a second and a half. It's like, are you doing that because you're crazy, or are you doing that because you don't know how to fake laugh as an actor?
Oh Jesus! What another layer to the onion. Is Sisko an unhinged psychopath, or is Avery Brooks?
Can it be both? Evidence suggests could be both.
To that same end, there's more of this weird dichotomy in the Sisko character because they're up there, they're eating dinner or whatever, and then down on the floor. Side note here. I'm having a hard time sticking to like the old playbook for our podcasts. I feel like we're talking about movies. There's so much content. I don't know if we're going to be able to do like scene by scene discussions. We might have to stick to like bigger concepts.
Yeah,
These
and
aren't
we did that. We did that, I think, with our most recent episode where we sort of breezed past it scene by scene, and instead we're kind of talking about the things that are important that happened.
yeah. And I think that's
Yeah,
how we're going to have to stick with this because there's just so much. Again, I got half a page of notes and so many thoughts on all of it. Down on the floor, Odo sees some guy he doesn't like, and Odo starts putting hands all over him and throws him out, and the guy tries to stand his ground, and we'll later come to find out that this guy was a smuggler who was a big deal during the Cardassian occupation. He would bring stuff in. Some people worshiped him as a hero, but he was a really piece of shit who, if you did not pay him, you did not get the goods. Odo watched a girl die. Odo hates this fucking guy. And Odo eventually got him in trouble for killing a Cardassian officer. And he was supposed to go away to the pokey for a long time, and he got out after a year. And Odo, we're still learning about this character. Odo believes at this point in justice, not the letter of the law. So this is a chaotic good character, not a lawful good character.
I don't. It's hard to say which it is, in my opinion. He's definitely not lawful good in the sense that he feels laws matter, and he has a nice line about that. Like laws change. One day, Cardassian laws. Next day, Federation laws. Day after tomorrow, who knows whose laws. But justice as a concept is different. Justice, we know what feels right. And what this motherfucker did is not right. And it needs to be punished. And I don't fucking like him. And it does convey what's important to him. Does that mean maybe he's neutral good? Maybe he's just true neutral. But he
Neutral
cares about
good.
the fact that justice be done rather than adherence to law. So he's already expressed a willingness to throw people off the station just because. He's a willingness to like, oh, why don't we tell the fucking Klingons that Lursa and Batory here come get them and alleviate us of this problem? Like
He's got a real vigilante vibe to him.
Yeah, he feels like Batman.
And I think he's just like one Sylvester Stallone impression of I am the law away
Judge Dredd
in this episode. And that gets contrasted by Cisco, who, again, speaking about Unhinged, they keep putting him into this check and balance role for Odo, where Odo wants to have these vigilante impulses where he does borderline despot actions, right? And then Cisco has to come in and like this pseudo Picard thing, be like, no, there's laws, there's norms, there's rules, and we must follow them. And it's like, dude, again, you're the guy that put Nog in jail to blackmail Quark into Sting. Now all of a sudden you're okay with. First, it was, hey, we can't just give. We can't have Lursa, the Duras sisters, hauled off to Klingon space where they're renegades because they haven't done anything bad here. Even though they tried to create a fucking civil war and plunge the Federation in with it and, empower the Romulans. Hey, here's a guy that's walking around that my chief of security really fucking hates, who just told me that, he lets little girls die and is also a fucking murderer. But hey, the government has changed and he hasn't been charged with anything currently. Like, we can't just kick him off the station.
Well, I think there's a very clear connection back to his mission, right? Which is get the Bajorans in by any means necessary. I mean, straight up, they say he killed a Cardassian. Current government doesn't consider that a crime, so we let him go. He's in good standing with the government. The people think he's a hero, and the man he murdered was, a Nazi. So fuck him.
I don't want to nitpick these scripts because this is a good episode. God, I haven't even started my fucking log yet, and I think it's going to be a very boring log of just bouncing between meh, good, and great. We'll see when they start dipping into some bad stuff here, but I don't want to sit here and script doctor this stuff because I don't think it necessarily needs it, but a line there could have been like, and kick him off, the local folk hero, and turn people against us. Like,
and considering that's what happens, that line is really all you would have needed.
right. Like, I don't like the idea of this guy either, but right now we've got bigger problems. Or right, now is not the time to go picking fights. Just fucking back off, dude. Real quick question about Odo. So Odo is wearing a Bajoran uniform.
Correct.
He's part of the provisional government then, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
As far as these uniforms go, why does Odo not have a standing collar, but like Kira does and some of Odo's subordinates do?
Odo isn't actually wearing a uniform. It's a facsimile that he creates when he assumes his current form. So that could be personal affectation choice.
Are there other people wearing Bajoran uniforms that do not have collars?
No, they're pretty consistently standing collars for security and operations. I wonder though if all the medical people, we'll have to look in the background because Bashir ends up with a lot of like medical personnel that assist him that are Bajorans to see if they're down collars. But
it would be cool if everybody else has a collar and like he can't replicate a face the right way. There's just parts of the uniform he can't get right either. And the collar is like one of the things he's just given up trying on.
Yeah, they do definitely start talking about his inability to make human faces correctly as a plot point. So not sure the lack of standing collar will be part of that, though.
So anyways, the whole end effect out of that scene with Sisko is like, Sisko's got this real two-face feel to him, I think, where and Odo does too, though, at the same time. Like, I believe in law and justice until I have my own personal interest and I discard it. I'm a nice guy, and then there's Sisko. I'm a nice guy. I want civilization. I act like a complete nut job. These guys are going to be great friends.
So the actual plot of this episode is that the skeevy guy that Odo doesn't like, who's the smuggler, goes to a holosuite, which are for fucking here on Deep Space Nine.
Are for fucking everywhere. There's no holodeck in the 24th century.
It is not for fucking?
Okay. That does not get fucked in. And if you've got a holodeck and you've never fucked in it, someone else is fucking in your holodeck and you just don't even know.
Yeah. Even on Voyager, chaste Voyager, the holodecks were most certainly for fucking explicitly. By the
Polynesian
captain,
resorts.
The captain was fucking the Irish bartender. Like, so we understand what they're for, and this guy's gonna have his happy ending with his massage program. And
what a smooth back he's got. How many times do you think they had to shave that down?
Probably just the once. Like, only gonna shoot that scene for one afternoon. But unfortunately, he gets an oopsie daisy in the form of a black hand and a knife in the back, and suddenly we have a murder investigation on our hands. And the whodunit very clearly starts to point directly at Odo as they collect evidence, which Odo immediately says, like, boy, this all is designed to make it look like I did it, didn't it? Doesn't it? Like, you'd be crazy not to think I did it.
So let's talk about the moving pieces. He is in his bucket, so he doesn't really have an alibi.
Correct. So
there's all sorts of mounting he was in evidence.
The bucket.
You get the first guy that goes in of his own volition, tells Sisko, "Oh, this guy came over to me and said, I bet you Odo's going to kill me." And they get what has to be the most evil-looking fucking actor possible.
I thought he was Ray Wise at first. He kind of looked a bit like him. But
the guy looks like the devil's kind of attractive son.
Yes, that's why I thought it was Ray Wise. But I looked it up, and it was some guy I never heard of, bit part actor.
So they get the most evil person possible, and I was shocked that he did not end up being the big bad. Ultimately, Sisko has to take him off the case because it looks too bad. And it all centers around like, okay, the door opened this many times, the guy died, there's no one coming in, there's no one going out, there's no way to get in here, and the only way someone could have killed this guy, the only way that someone could have killed this guy, Joe, all right, this guy's on the holodeck. He's getting a rub and tug on the holodeck.
Right.
The door doesn't open. He's just in the holodeck alone with the holodeck characters.
Which are definitely known to never malfunction and kill people.
Right. And the only way that
Yeah.
someone gets in would have been a shapeshifter. At no point, this is, throw the episode in the trash over this, literally. Because Miles O'Brien is standing around when they're talking about this. Miles O'Brien, whose life has been put in danger by Barkley plugged into the holodeck with his brain, Moriarty, fucking Red Brick. Yeah, the only way that someone could have killed this guy was if they were a shapeshifter goo. Not a single thought of like, what if the holodeck killed this guy?
But yeah, and did maybe the masseuse kill them and it turned the safeties off?
Yeah, like hold on a second. Are the safeties on? What safeties? There's no safeties in these holosuits.
Yeah, these aren't OSHA regulated holosuites. Like they don't have safeties.
Do me a favor, pull up that masseuse program real quick. See if like one of the trained fetish categories in there is knife play.
Oh, I'm sorry. You accidentally booked the snuff film with holosuite.
I'm sorry.
Bad.
I was on the wrong line. He's not in Tundublian Massage Parlor 3. He was actually in the 8mm recreation. Not a single, I mean, Perman era, at least 40 episodes are dedicated to the holodeck tried to kill us. And not a single person here says, maybe. Like, you could even like made it like a part of the, oh, this is some top level assassin shit. What if someone hacked the holodeck and made the masseuse try and kill him? Which the Doctor did do the one time on Voyager. Like, you know, this shit happens. Those Polynesian girls tried to strangle him.
It's true. So you're right. Major plot botch. Okay, we've gotten the pen out already.
Yeah.
Who did it? Michael Piller, you fucking asshole.
Yeah, Michael Piller must not be aware of holodecks in the 24th century.
But so the plot then barrels into, in my opinion, a very, very awkward kind of spot, which is we're suddenly going to make everyone being uncomfortable with Odo a thing, and we're going to turn it into an episode where a bunch of people don't like Odo because he's a shapeshifter, which is this jarring mid-episode change. Like, this is a murder mystery. We're trying to find out who did it. You know, we could create a circumstance by which Odo's being suspected of that is a problem. You can do that. You should do that. But they decide to go very specifically in the direction of having the Roger Corman employed Bajoran evil guy lead a band of other Bajoran men to Cisco to be like, we don't like him because he's a shapeshifter, and then they're breaking into his place and they're graffitiing it and throwing bricks at him later, and it's like, where the fuck did this come from?
Could have been close, because Mr. Evil Face says, like, you know, he worked for the Cardassians. Why is he still in charge?
Mm-hmm. That would have worked.
The whole lynch mob thing could have worked, and lo and behold, here we are dragging out our script edits here. I don't know what they wanted to do with this entire thing, but what they could have done was, hey, Odo used to be a real motherfucker who did not follow the rules, or his version of justice is all that he cared about, and maybe the Cardassians tolerated it. And if they would have had an opening at some point where he was really abusing his shape-shifting powers, and like, you know, remember Clayface from Batman, the animated series, where he'd just like throw goo piles at people and like nail them to the walls. If you really had him flaunting his shapeshifterness and doing like nasty stuff and like police brutalizing people, basically, this could have been a good character arc episode for Odo. Like, you can't be a jackbooted thug now that the Federation's here. You got to do things the right way, and you can't be this monster. And like, maybe he used to have a real severe reputation, and this was the natural progression of the Bajoran occupants to be like, you are a sore reminder of Cardassian rule, and we remember the bad things you did, and you need to change because we've had this riot, this lynch mob thing pop out around you. But instead, he's just like, okay, he is kind of mean to a guy who has a rep, who was a murderer, and then that guy disappears, and then all of a sudden, people are literally storming security office like it's Castle Frankenstein. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah. It's like they had a separate idea for this episode that it was going to be about people being uncomfortable with a shapeshifter, and that was going to be the A plot.
An out of control shapeshifter.
And suddenly they decided to take a piece of that and combine it into their murder mystery episode, and it's a tonal mismatch. It's a focus shift that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, why is this happening? Like, this is about Odo's beef with a guy who's bad, right? Like, that was what we spent the first half of this episode building up to, and trying to flesh out why this is all happening and what the nature of their beef is and who is this guy. It was a distraction. It was bad, and it held
I'll
the
tell you what
episode
else.
second half back a lot to me.
I don't know how far out they forecast what was going to happen in Deep Space Nine in terms of like Dominion War and stuff, but this would have been an amazing resource episode if he is just constantly masquerading as other people and like not body snatching, but just, masquerading as other people. And like this episode representing that you cannot do this all the time. You cannot steal people's identity. You cannot abuse this magic power you have to morph because it's wrong and we value our individual, blah, 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 blah. Couple seasons later, hey, here's real bad guys that do this. And we already know that the Federation hates the idea of identity thieves. And like Odo has learned his lesson. And like, what a great contrast that would be.
To briefly go back to our school marm subplot, one thing that they changed dramatically that they introduce here but turn into something very different later on is the character of Rom. We meet Rom really for the first time. This is Nog's dad. This is Quark's brother. And Rom is portrayed as like a pit boss in the gambling area of Quarks, right? And he seems to be pretty confident. He gives this whole pitch about how Ferengi teach their children when he's interacting with Keiko, who's trying to get him to send Nog to school. And Rama ultimately obviously becomes a very important recurring character on the show, given that he's the Grand Nagus when we were watching Lower Decks. So
spoilers,
kind of spoiled for you, but he's they decided they want to write him more as a doofus, kind of a comic relief character. So they have this very serious initial version of Rom, and then I think it's actually the second or third time that he's on there, like his characterization dramatically changes into the sort of put upon doofus brother, which I think ends up working better as a comic foil to Quark, which is
has to be. You can't have an amazing, perfect character like Quark and then also have this other guy who's holding down the fort and whatever. Like, yeah. Maybe that'll be our byline for DS9 as a story of foils.
Yeah, no, they do it. They do contrast between characters very good on this show. I will agree, but they have plenty of opportunity.
Contrast and duos. Nog and Jake Sisko hanging out, and Nog's got basically some fucking space bedbugs or fleas, and they're like, "Hey, here's people eating. Let's go drop this shuttle over them, and then we're gonna go hide in an event where security is also standing and laugh." And the ridiculousness here, where like the people are eating and they stand up and they're scratching, like, "Oh my god, I'm parasites." And then they start changing colors from yellow to blue and green and red.
I'm chroma keyed. Oh no.
And they're screaming for help as they're looking at each other and their own hands changing colors as they're violently scratching. And then their skin tone turns normal and they stop scratching. They just smile and sit back down and eat. What fucking world are these people living in? Where they just went through the color spectrum and then they sit back down. That must be some really great, I don't know, macaroni and cheese or whatever they're eating to sit back down and finish the meal.
Oh, or it's just you're in space, right? Like they're taking their Federation antidepressants. Oh, yeah, it's fine. I'm fine now. Nothing's wrong. I definitely don't need medical attention. this Cheeto flavored mac and cheese is not going to eat itself. Excuse me.
Or, hey, I spent a long time in a Cardassian prison camp, and I've been through a lot worse than turning yellow. I'm not worried about this. Let's finish.
So Keiko ultimately succeeds in getting a few students for her class by the end. It's Jake and Nog, who, after getting into hijinks as children do, they end up having to go to school, and a couple of Bajoran kids join. I will note, though, that Aaron Einberg, once again, every single one of these Ferengi characters are played by Jewish actors. Like, they literally did not miss. Is an adult, not a kid. He was born a wee man, and so he was cast specifically because they wanted somebody that would be able to read against Jake that would be under so much makeup, so you wouldn't really be able to tell that he was an adult, but would clearly be at his stature that you could give more complex work to, and this pairing ends up obviously being very important as the show goes on.
He was cast by a production crew that knew that children actors are terrible, and they were already saddled with at least 2 in this series. So why push the limits?
I thought Molly was fine. Mommy, where you been?
She's great, but I'm just saying, for every Molly, there's a what was Wildman's daughter?
Oh, Naomi.
Yeah, I like Jake too.
Yeah, Jake grows on you because you get to see him grow up, right?
And you feel bad because they're sticking him in fucking Berman era civilian clothing, which is just the worst. Possible every
step for like a real lanky kid like that. It's just incredibly unflattering.
It's terrible. Speaking of outfits, what's the deal with the Bajoran earrings? Who gets to wear them? Why do they wear them? I mean, Rolaren made a big deal out of it. A lot of these Bajorans have no earrings. What's going on?
The wearing of a Bajoran earring is supposed to represent adherence to the Bajoran faith, and is also a family affectation. So each individual Bajoran family, I think, is supposed to have like a different design. So wearing the earring was forbidden while the Cardassians were in charge, of course. So, wearing it and then has a political statement involved to it. So I think they don't end up going any further in the specifics of the lore on it beyond kind of what we've picked up in bits and pieces. They'll certainly talk about the earrings more. But that's generally it's a signifier that this is someone that believes in the Bajoran religion more than anything else.
So they're just wearing crosses. I gotcha.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's the visible crucifix. You're right. That's probably the best way to think of it.
Sisko takes Odo off the case. Odo's he gets hostile with Sisko, and I think it's a reasonable move for Sisko.
Oh, sure.
And the lack of empathy and understanding from Odo, again, it's a nice it's a nice he's not people moment. Like,
yeah, he's an alien.
This is an alien. Kieran Reese sticking up from ferociously. A lot of trips up to one of the ships that's docked on Deep Space Nine. That's the ship that bad guy came in on. Julian does a quick once over with the tricorder and flashy light and a little dust devil and sucks up some goo over by the garbage can.
What goo it is.
Clone a whole person out of it.
So he takes the goo and he's like, I'm going to see what this goo is, right? I'm going to just experiment on the goo. And he accidentally makes an illegal person. All right, let's not bury the lead here, right? This plot winds up with Bashir going, oops, I made a person. I made a clone of a guy, a sentient, alive clone.
It's one of those moments where they put something into play. We're like, hold on, go back. What?
Yeah, like, we made a person. out of all this. What is he going to do? Who knows? What's his name? I guess whatever he picks.
What's his social security number?
I better give him one. Like, how long is he going to live? Well, it was illegal research, so who knows? Like, this guy's going to have the mother of existential crises. How are you made? On accident. Because the Federation doctor was investigating what this goo was, and now I'm here. Like,
the guy that I'm made after made my older brother, I guess, and knifed him in the back in a jack-off program. And he's also a murderer for other like, this should have been the main thrust of the episode.
Yeah, like, tell me about how that guy... I want to come back to this guy.
So in Next Gen, they would pick the thing to become the moral conundrum, and that'll become the focal point of the episode and debating and everything else. Deep Space Nine, it is a busy go plot where the moral conundrum or a moral conundrum is created and quickly discarded in ways that only early Berman Trek could do.
They literally dismiss it with he goes to start his own life. It's like Pooji goes back to his home planet. Don't fucking ask us about this clone. We decided we're going to do a clone where he's making clones. So how do we prove this? We're going to have them accidentally make a clone.
People will not stop asking us about this fucking guy's clone. Like, you know what? You want clones that bad? Where's Thomas Riker at? Get him in here. But, what else? What else have they cloned? Who else have they cloned? Kahless, right? He's a clone.
That's true. Kahless is a clone.
Can you think of any other Next Gen era clones out there?
No,
Trip was cloned, but we're not going to count that.
And Thomas Riker, and I guess
Thomas Riker wasn't even like medical clone. That was transporter
cloned. And I guess Kim is technically a clone.
That's not a genetic engineering clone, though. That is an alternate reality clone.
Correct.
Which isn't even a clone. That's just a variant.
So yeah, this is the first genetic engineered clone. I think
after that, the closest we're getting is Worf's spinal cord with the Genetronic replicator.
Yeah,
and think of the major plot thrust that episode was. Is replicating his spine, ethically sound. And then here again, 45 seconds dedicated to we made a person, which again,
we didn't know we were making a person until halfway through, and then we realized we did, and then we kind of sent him on his way. Like, good luck.
Hey,
by the way, here's the guy who made you. He's in prison now.
We can clone people, no big deal. That's going to be the new post-mortem revival technique for Deep Space Nine. In Voyager, they could bring you back from the dead. In Voyager, they can just clone you, no big deal.
Oh, you know what? I forgot there is another clone. Shinzon. Shinzon's a clone.
Yeah. Hey, he gets a whole fucking movie.
He does.
I want the movie where this guy comes back working for the Romulans and goes after his master.
Isn't there a TNG episode where they go to a planet where everyone's a clone, though?
Fair, yeah. That's the one with Cochrane.
No, it's a TNG episode. It's not a TOS.
Zephram Cochrane is
Zephram Cochrane shows up in a TOS episode.
No, he shows up in a TNG episode also.
No, he doesn't.
Yes, he does.
No, he doesn't.
What's the fucking guy's name?
False.
What's his name?
Zephram Cochrane?
No, the actor.
Well, I don't know who would have played him in TNG.
About to get pie all up in your face, bro. He plays Nayrock, TNG, The Hunted. That's the guy who developed Roga Dinar.
Well, no, the actor.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
But you said Zephram Cochrane.
I meant the fucking actor, the guy who plays
different. That's different.
It's not. It's the same.
It is. That's a character. He does.
I'm talking about the guy. We're talking about the actor. I know Zephram.
No, that guy plays a bunch of characters. James Cromwell plays a bunch of different guys.
No, I actually thought that he was playing the leader of the, because it's that super racist Irish episode, right? Where it's like the genetic engineered perfect people, but they don't want to share their planet
with the dirty Irish. Yes,
and then you've got the Irish hobos who need a place to live, and
The hot
Picard,
one bangs Riker and all that. Yeah.
yeah, and then they just dump them all in there and fly away in typical Enterprise fashion for the Cerritos to clean up 20 years later. Yeah, I think they were all clones, though. And it's not James Cromwell who's playing the lead clone in that, but it looks just like him. So maybe, cloning's not that rare in TNG anyways, if there's an entire fucking planet of these guys, but still big deal. So I like that the guy goes back into jail for murder yet again for killing his own clone, which shows that I guess clones have rights. And Odo gets reinstituted, and Sisko has a line of dialogue that nobody said they're sorry for trying to lynch mob him. Like, even like Mr. Evil Face is
It's like, well, that seems pretty fucked up.
It's like, oh yeah, he's right. How do you lynch? How do you fit a noose around a shapeshifter? Like, whoa, bro. Murderous, racist motherfucker.
With a smile on his face, too.
With an evil smile on his face. So, Sisko's just like, well, I had the entire station in a revolt against the chief of security. Nobody said they're sorry. I had to shoot a phaser again to disperse the crowd. A lot of these people were in uniform and are ostensibly under my command, and we're just going to pretend it never happened.
Just another day in this fucking chaotic garbage heap that I have been posted to. Seems good.
Could have thrown a line in there like, if I wasn't under orders to get these guys into the Federation, I would have half the station in the brig or something.
Yeah. Oh, God. And the episode needed that. It needed more than a perfunctory, these guys were dickbags, and there was no resolution. There needed to be a moment where he's like, this is awful. Like, this is going to be a real fucking challenge.
Kira want blood. Like, these guys, tried to hurt my friend. And then Sisko, like, we're here to make peace, not create tension. I'm not happy about it either, but the show's got to go on, whatever. How important those orders from Picard are. I'm curious if they're going to call specific attention to them later on, because Sisko is eating a lot of shit. Or maybe Sisko's just perfectly fine. If he's cool with child killers and murderers and the Duras sisters walking around NBD, maybe, he's just like, listen, you got to do a lot of bullshit before you get on my radar. And then when you get on my radar, I drop the hammer on you. Good episode. It's busy.
It strikes me more as a meh if I were going to use your rating. It's just because I think that it abandoned its own core premise about halfway through and tries to start doing something else, and it doesn't fit. There's a lot to pull from it that's important for the future. You start to establish, like you said, Odo and Quark have a frenemy relationship. It's very important. Dax and Sisko, they're old friends. That's going to be important. She's calling him Benjamin from the start, right? Like, she has a familiarity with her superior officer that we've never seen out of a subordinate before.
Till Raffi. I need her to start calling him BS. BS, my good friend.
Gonna make me vomit.
BS.
And
you're bringing up a great point here. I don't know how to rate these episodes. I can't view this as a standalone television show. After Voyager, after Enterprise, maybe subjectively this thing is a meh, but I can't look at anything as other than good right now, because
good relative to what you've consumed. I completely agree.
It might even be great relative to what we've consumed in the past. I'm going to have to really, I don't know.
You have to pull it back. I know you want to go native. You're a man who wants to go full Chakotay.
I got co-opted, man.
Where you get co-opted a lot, but what are we watching next week that's going to try to pull you in?
Season 1, Episode 5, Babel. A virus infects the station's residents, making almost everyone unable to speak coherently. This sounds miserable.
So this is DS9 trying to do a TNG-style plot, and to the degree that DS9 has some stumbles early, it's going to be shit like this. It's like, we've already got a sense of what the show is. It is not a show that is going to do goofy space dilemma stuff particularly well. That's not what they want to do. But the writers, that's what they're used to making. So they make Babel and then a few others that we're going to be subjected to. I still think that ultimately this ends up having like an interesting idea behind it. I just don't think it should have been a DS9 episode. But we'll
I
judge
hate
that together.
anything that focuses too heavy on language and the inability of people to speak correctly.
Yeah,
That's like one
we
of my
know how much you love that the Catch and Jungle Fighters episode from Voyager, where they're talking about their sister mothers and walking softly with the big sticks or whatever the fuck it was.
you get too deep with this shit, and it's like, come on, make this a episode about how the universal translator breaks. That would be interesting.
It would, especially when they're in, like, if you paired it with they're getting like people from the Gamma Quadrant coming in and they're
They've
having to like do
overloaded
diplomatic stuff.
We need to
And
get
they're-
more RAM for the universal translator.
Ugh. We haven't even watched the episode and we're already rewriting it better. But we'll watch it and then rewrite it more next week. See ya.